Let's get things started. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that a lot of people really aren't really into talking about. If anything, it's something they tend to be a bit against. Let me go ahead and see. Just need y'all to let me know how I'm sounding. Let me turn this down a bit. What I might actually do is we might just keep it there. Change this over. There you go. That's a little better. Today we're gonna talk about discipline. And I know this is one of those things that is a tough subject for some people because agree with how this is talked about. Some more people get in. Crap, it looks like we're running low. Hold on. Let me see. We might be having some issues. We're in our new place now, so some adjustments have been made. Let's see what we can do. Get ourselves hooked up. Here in a second, we're going to go ahead and start in on the discussion. Just waiting for some people to come in. Let me see. Let's check out something real quick. All right, we're looking good. I'm just making sure we're still on the up and up. Still getting the whole Wi-Fi thing figured out, so trying to make sure that we're all right. Keep track of those on here. All right, who do we got? We got two people. It's one on Twitch and one on YouTube. It's funny. I honestly should have did this earlier because I had so many thoughts in my head about how I wanted to approach this, what I wanted to do approaching it, and it's honestly something that is, I don't know, we've kind of been going in a theme, if we really think about it. We've been actually kind of going into a theme where I think last week was, let me reference back. Last week was the importance of patience. No, week before that was. The week before that was the importance of patience. Last week was mistakes and how to deal with them. And of course, today is discipline. What you might notice is that I left the title vague. I actually didn't add on something like, the importance of self-discipline or, the benefits of, physical or mental discipline or how to properly discipline your kids. I didn't really go into specifics. And there's a reason I did that. And one of those main reasons is because what I want to do today is actually break down the definition of discipline and for us to really look at it for what it actually is, right? Before I actually do that, because I'm going to get that fired up and make sure that's straight, I'm going to actually have that as our question All right. All right. All right. So before we even dig into that, first question I'm going to ask is, when you hear the word discipline, what is the first thing to come to mind? Because before I, formally defined it and whatever, I want to know what you guys think. Because that, knowing where everyone is at with this is just as important, if not more important, than the actual definition of the word itself. I could definitely say. Because to be honest, there are so many different iterations of this word that are regularly used and that we could apply in so many different situations. So I really want to know where people's heads are with this particular definition, well, what their particular definition is. So yeah, let me know. Let me see. I'm actually just scrolling through stuff, so I'm gonna see what this sounds like. Yeah, I can roll with that. There's a little something in the background. Is everything looking all right? That is something I am curious about. Because like I said, we're in a new location now, so I'm trying to get everything figured out. So this one may not be as perfect, and if it isn't, we'll go ahead and readdress it later. But this is definitely something I wanted to talk about. What's up, Kiki Nikoru? Okay, so you see the question down here. When you hear the word discipline, what is the first thing that comes to mind? And every answer is okay. I'm honestly more curious than anything. You know what I'm saying? I want to know what's actually on your mind about it. What you're thinking. Let's see. Meanwhile, while you guys are doing that, I'm just gonna do some touching up. Yeah, we could probably do that. Self-control, patience. Okay. I like that. And maybe as a follow-up question, I might ask, what are the things that make you think of self-control and patience? Why is that something that you associate with discipline? Because like I said, I want to kind of establish where everybody's head is at before we really get knee deep into this topic, because it is something that I know we'll definitely revisit, especially once DarksKing comes back. So be on the lookout for this to be an audio pod. Every one that we have talked about in the last 3 weeks, this included, is going to be an audio podcast that will be coming soon. I just wanted to make certain that DarksKing comes back before we start talking about it. Sorry about that. Hold on. Basically, I was wanting to know, what is it that you feel like makes you think of that? You know, because you said patience and self-control were the first things you think of when you think of discipline. So, what is it that makes that be what you think? You know, I kind of want you to kind of dig into it and think that part through. And yeah, I'm sorry about the connection. Trying to get some things figured out. Let's see. Were you able to catch that, Kiki? A second. Okay, Kiki Nikoru says, being aware that I can do what I want with self-control, but with self-control, I get a chance to think before just reacting. And sometimes I feel it also takes patience with myself and others. Okay. So, yeah. And you know what? That is definitely something that you could veritably say is a part of discipline. That is something you could definitely attach to discipline. Sometimes I think that, and I'm really glad that you have that perception of it, and I think sometimes that comes from adulthood, but sometimes when you bring up the subject of discipline, you know, be it to adults, children, whatever, they automatically have a negative connotation in their mind of what it is, right? They already have a negative perception that, well, I think of discipline in this way, right? I think of discipline as being this thing or being that thing, right? So, with that being said, sometimes when you tell somebody, you know, that, you know, you require discipline, you need that, and discipline is important, a lot of people will bite back against that and try to assert that, hey, I don't need to be disciplined. You know, I've literally, in the line of work I'm in now, I've literally had people say that. I've literally had people say, well, I never was, you know, as a child. And I think that what we forget is that things that affect us as children and the lessons that we learn from being children are not always just relegated to being a child. They're not always just relegated to that. A lot of things that we learn as children are things that are supposed to be applied to the future, applied to us when we're adults, right? We have to keep in mind, yes, some people think of the trauma in their childhood where they weren't able to have an opinion. Yes, I like that. Because it's very true. That's very true. So for some people, discipline, the concept of discipline may involve, right, like they had to just fall in line and not be different. It may involve trauma. It may involve, you know, them feeling like they had to be something that they weren't, right? That they had to become a different type of person, that they had to pretend, you know, or have some sort of novel behavior that would keep people off their backs and allow people to leave them alone, you know, things like that. And I think sometimes that causes more problems than it fixes. You know, a lot of times what discipline really means, and I guess I'll just go ahead and explain it, since we only got a couple people in here, and I figured some people might be a bit averse to this topic, but hopefully they come back later. The definition of discipline it's actually a couple of them. One is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior, using punishment to correct disobedience, right? So half of that is what we're used to. Two is a branch of knowledge, typically one studied in a higher education, which we won't really be talking too much about that particular definition, but it's good to keep in mind. Our code of behavior. Issues. Hold on. Let me see if there's one I can hop on here. Okay, sorry. We had a little bit of a lag. Kiki Nikoru said they think to a degree that someone says that they mean like they are dismissing their opinion and ideas, telling them to follow and fit the mold and not to stand out. Right. Here's my thing. What I want people to look at, what I want us to look at discipline as, I want it to be looked at in more of the educational realm. So basically, in the avenue of discipline is a tool to learn, right? Let me see. The Latin word of discipline, it comes from discipulus, which goes into disciplina, which means instruction and knowledge, right? So now the interesting thing is the Old French and Old English describes discipline as mortification by scourging oneself, right? So here's the interesting thing about that. You have two divergent paths of what this word is defined as. On one end, you have the self, basically not even necessarily like self-mortification, right? And then on another end, which is basically the punishment, on the other end you have the concept of knowledge and teaching, right? This is instruction. So when you put it together in some ways, it is in some ways giving instruction and offering knowledge, but it can also be in the vein of punishing someone so that they do gain that instruction and knowledge, or when they do not follow that instruction and knowledge, right? Punishing negative behaviors. So that's one side of it. But we talk about that side so much that there's really no point. What I want to focus on is the educational side. The educational side implies that you are teaching or giving instruction. Now, here's the thing. No matter how old you get, no matter what part of life you're experiencing, there is always an opportunity to what? Learn. There's always an opportunity to be instructed or to be taught something, you know, or to gain some measure of knowledge from somewhere that maybe you're not too familiar with, right? Or in something that maybe you're not too familiar with. Or maybe it is and you're just trying to gain more. That is discipline. You know, if you've ever heard of the phrase of a disciplined mind or a disciplined body, that is a moment where you as a person are gaining knowledge or going by proper instruction and teaching in order to become better, in order to improve, right? I see discipline more as self-improvement, or more as someone encouraging you to improve through instruction, right? And when you look at it like that, it's hard to see that as a negative. That's not saying that people don't. They do. They do. Because just like Kiki said, sometimes people see it as a limiter, as a box, right? So you're basically saying, okay, here are your boundaries. You can't go past that, right? And not giving up the possibility of being like, well, maybe I need to cross that boundary because it might do something good for me, right? Right. So, with that being said, boundaries can be implied in this. You know, I'm not saying it doesn't apply, it does. But it should only be applied when it's needed. As in, you should never discipline or give instruction with the intent of limiting somebody's potential or ability to grow. Anytime you offer knowledge, right? If educational is added, I think determination and betterment. Thank you. Look, if you're giving out knowledge, if you're offering instruction, your intent should be to make certain that this person elevates, they grow, right? They do better. You know, that's the idea you want to go for. You want to elevate, you want to build. You don't want to limit them and give them a cap and say this is as far as you can go. But sometimes what we fail at as parents, as role models, as just individuals who are in a position to offer instruction, instead we offer critiques. Instead, we offer things that will force somebody's scope of understanding to be limited. And to me, that's problematic. And the reason that's problematic is because that's not the intent. That's not the literary intent of what this word is, right? So with that being said, when you look into something like discipline, you have to think of that in a practical way. You have to think about it in a way that, you know, lets people know, hey, look, this is something that's intended to teach you. This is something that is intended to help you grow. This is something that is intended to help you develop. And when it's given with that implication, and when it's given with the understanding that it's something that is needed for someone to develop, then it can be received better and it will do better, right? Because look, I'm a 90s kid. I know what discipline meant to me when I was a kid. Discipline meant to me when I was a kid that you either shape up or somebody's going upside your head, right? Or you're going to get in trouble and they're going to take all your stuff, right? Or it meant I got in trouble and I came home and all of a sudden my TV didn't have any cable attached to it, right? And that leans more into the other side of discipline, which is instruction through punishment. Basically saying that if you do not heed the instructions in the traditional sense, that now you have to suffer a consequence as a result of your negative actions, right? And that's part of it. That is part of it. But the thing is, as I've gotten older, as I've learned more, as I've studied more, as I've experienced more, I realize that you have to have both, especially when it comes to self-discipline. What's up, DSOG Mental? Oh, you actually missed the definition. Actually, I'd rather know what you think it is. What is the first thing? Like, you see the comment, you see the question. When you hear the word discipline, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of it? Because I want to know where you come from before I really bring a definition. I want to know where you come from. Because honestly, what we're going to get into talking about here in a little bit, and I'm not going to hold you guys too long. This might end up being a two-parter and something that we'll discuss further when DarksKing comes back, which he will be back next week. So we'll be able to get into a lot more interesting topics and be able to bounce off each other a little bit more. There might be some of these that we bring back, like this, where we can really get into the meat of it and really discuss it in depth. But yeah, man, before I even tell you what the definition is, I want to know what your thought is on it, what your personal definition is of discipline, what you think of. Because I feel like that makes all the difference in the world, understanding what your perspective is on it versus me just telling you. You see, what we've got so far, if you want something to jump off of, is self-control, patience, has to do with each other's perspective. Okay, well, I know that. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I want to know what your perspective is. I do want to know what I want to know what your perspective on discipline is. Before I just give you a full-on definition, because I don't want to just manipulate that and say, well, this is what it is, you know. Kiki Nikoru says, I think people have a bad experience with the word because of, like you said, our childhood. Adults combining discipline and punishment is one word. Yeah. And a lot of it is because punishment. Oop, we're getting a little weak. Instead of punishment just being one facet of many in discipline, right? Because your entire childhood, everything that you learn, everything that you're taught from your parents, everything that they give you in terms of knowledge and information is discipline, right? It's discipline. Because think about it. For those of you guys who do read the Bible, who have read the Bible, what is it that Jesus called his followers? He called them what? Disciples. That comes from the word discipline. Does that mean he was beating them over the head all the time every time they did something stupid? No. It means that he led by example and showed them a path for living. It's giving an example of what it is to be done. Kiki Nikoru says, discipline to me is understanding. So we have to understand cause and effect with every action. And lack of discipline can lead to a type of punishment. Thank you. I like that. I really like that. Because here's the thing. What we're going to go into, and I guess just for the sake of you, DSOG, I'll go ahead and give the textbook definition again. Because I know you weren't here for that part. Basically, yeah, but when you give me a whooping my ass, just don't say you when you just give me a whooping my ass, don't say you discipline me. Right. Because that's just one aspect, right? And I agree with you. I don't think we should just say I'm disciplining my child and only use that in the case in which, we going upside their head. You know what I'm saying? Say you punish me. Yeah. And that's another problem is sometimes, because here's the thing. Punishment without instruction, either prior or afterwards, is not discipline. It all depends on what each one thinks on what is wrong or right. Well, not for a base definition. Because the base definition is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code or behavior, and using punishment to correct discipline. To correct disobedience, right? Or an activity or experience that provides mental or physical training. See what I mean? System of rules or conduct, a branch of knowledge, typically one studied in higher education. Notice that only one of those definitions really implies punishment, and only as a reaction to negative behavior. So what it really is just giving instruction. Like I said, an activity, I like that one the best. The activity or experience that provides mental or physical training, right? So if we look at the root of the word, which is discipulus, which becomes disciplina, which is instruction and knowledge, that is the root of discipline. The root of discipline is instruction and knowledge. So that means that what? At the root of what discipline is or should be, it should be the application or the offering of instruction and knowledge. When we are and that's why before we can discipline anybody else or educate somebody else, we have to be educated, right? So that means if I'm coming at you and telling you, hey, yo, chill, cut that out, blah, 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 that behavior's negative, I got to know what I'm talking about before I get in your face, right? Right? So with that being said, I got to have an understanding of what I'm talking about before I approach you, which means I have to be what? I have to be disciplined. And that's the biggest thing, is that I have to have an understanding. I have to have the self-discipline to know that something I'm telling you is right or wrong, right? Or that something I'm telling you is going to benefit you, right? Because if I don't, then I'm just saying words. You know what I'm saying? I'm just telling you something. Or I'm just trying to punish you for something that I fallaciously believe is right when I didn't do the work to understand that. So when you ask about what's wrong or what is right, that comes from the learning aspect. You determine what is wrong and what is right by getting right knowledge and by, seeking out proper knowledge and instruction. From seeking out sources of knowledge and instruction that are not only credible, but also veritable. Like you can verify them, you can test them. These are things like the standards that you're taught as a child, or even as an adult, or even as a young adult by your parents, your peers, your role models, whoever. These should be things that you can put to the test and verify whether they are beneficial to you, right? So what makes, the SOG Mental says, what makes something right or wrong to discipline someone? I would say that, and I think what it is you're looking at discipline still as a form of punishment or rebuke, and it's not always. Discipline is the whole of education for somebody when you're teaching them or instructing them. The punishment aspect only comes as a result of only comes as a consequence. See what I'm saying? So when you talk about it, what makes something right or wrong is whether or not when you test that knowledge, if it applies to the situation. Yes, discipline is training someone up. You have to be able to test that knowledge and verify whether it is beneficial to you, whether it works. If it works, then that means it's right. Why? Because you tested it. Yeah. What do you feel is worth teaching? Right. Because here's the thing. And I'm glad you brought this up. Because sometimes we can mishandle the concept of discipline. Sometimes folks in the street get disciplined the wrong way all the time. And I'm not talking about their mama whooping them. I'm talking about being out there and learning things that are not beneficial to them. You know what I'm saying? Learning to emulate negative behaviors is bad discipline. That is wrong discipline, but it is a discipline. It is a form of discipline because they're being taught that. They didn't just do it. They're being taught that. So learning negative behaviors is a form of discipline. So when you take those quote unquote negative behaviors and you test them, as in applying them to your life and enacting them in your life, and you realize that they are negative, that's how you know it's wrong. If somebody comes around and teaches you something that does end up benefiting you after you test it, then guess what? That means it's right. That's how you determine that. And yes, you're right. The perception of what right or wrong is up to the person, up to the individual, and what their personal code is. But at the end of the day, there are some things in this world that you can learn are unquestionably right or wrong. Because if it's something that is inaccurate, like if somebody tells you that, if someone teaches you and you've never been, like, say you've never been outside, say you've never looked outside, and they tell you that the sky is pink, right? That is a form of discipline because that's a form of teaching. You're being taught something that you didn't know previously, right? And you might believe that until you walk outside and you look up and you see that the sky is blue and sometimes gray, but never pink. Guess what that means? You've been wrongly disciplined. You've been wrongly taught because you were taught something that was incorrect. When you tested it by looking into the sky and seeing what it looks like, you found it to be invalid. So you want to know how I discipline? Well, in the opportunities that I have to teach and to educate somebody, if it's something that I know or have some degree of expertise in, I sit down and just like I do on here, I'm a definition person. So I'll look up the definition of a word. If it's something I'm trying to apply or a concept I'm trying to apply, I look up the definition of it. I take it from there and then try to figure out what they perceive it as first. And then from there on, we discuss it. And then we try together to figure out the right answer. DarksKing and I do this all the time. We'll sit down and we'll talk something out, for hours. That's actually kind of how the podcast came about, because we would just sit down and we would just think about different concepts and different things, thoughts and theories, whatever ideas, and we just bounce them back and forth between us, and there may be times where I don't agree with his definition and he doesn't agree with mine, but maybe we can find a common ground because we're looking towards the same general idea. So while there are wrong forms of discipline, there is no one right form of discipline. See what I mean? Because different forms of teaching apply differently to different people. If there's anything I've learned from my line of work is you can have a whole group of kids that all live in the same house, and every single one of them will be in need of a different type of teaching, of a different form of teaching. You might be teaching them all the same relative things because they live in the same house, but you have to approach it in a radically different way from each other because they're all individuals and they're all different and they all learn differently. So what does that mean? You have to change your approach. So sometimes it isn't so much whether the discipline itself is right. It's whether the approach that you're giving to discipline is right. Because here's the thing. I can be perfectly knowledgeable on a subject. I can know it beyond a shadow of a doubt to a T. There's nothing you could tell me where it's wrong. I can show you in every way possible that it is right and correct. But if I approach somebody, say you, in the wrong, and I'm running up on you with a whole book of what I'm talking about, and I'm yelling in your face and then coming at you recklessly and telling you you're stupid because you don't know this. Like, what's wrong with you? How do you not get this? Then guess what I'm doing? Even though what I'm saying may be correct, my approach isn't. So guess what that makes it? That makes that bad discipline. That makes that wrong discipline and wrong teaching. Because guess what you're not going to get out of that? You're not going to get out of that anything that I just told you or anything that I just taught you. You're going to get out of that that I'm a negative person and that you shouldn't listen to me, or you won't want to listen to me because all I'm doing is telling you that you're stupid. You're going to hold on to that. You're not going to care what I got to say, right? So we have to understand that there is more than one avenue of what discipline and teaching is. And you're going to hear me use those interchangeably because they're both the same thing. They're both part of the same thing. Kiki Nikoru says, I discipline my little family members that when they intentionally or unintentionally hurt someone, that their words can hurt them deeper than what they wanted. And with age, I give reference to my experience. And then if it continues and I catch it, they will get a punishment while I explain why. Yes. And one thing that is actually taught a lot, if we go into the concept of parenting with discipline, is that discipline should be short and sweet. I think sometimes a lot of us as adults, we fall in love with lengthy explanations. People like to yell at their kids. I don't know why. It's just something we do. And just like the example I was giving before, that doesn't do anything. So sometimes when it is you having to correct a negative behavior, just correct it. Get it out of the way. Then once it's done, and once the punishment is done, you don't go back in their face and say, see, I told you, I don't know why you always be acting stupid. What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. You've already corrected the behavior. When you come back to it and backtrack, you've basically just invalidated everything you did. You shouldn't even punish them because you're continuing to punish them, right? They're not going to get the hint from you yelling at them. But they will get the hint if you just nip it in the bud, shut it down, right? And that's what you have to do with negative behavior. You have to shut it down. I'm trying not to get off subject, but not your way of discipline. Okay. Not your way of discipline. I was asking what makes something wrong or right. Like for killing a certain type of animal to eat, is that wrong or right? And like I said, with those sort of things, it's something that you have to test and verify. You have to test things to verify them, right? So, case in point, if you have an absolute need to kill a certain type of animal in order to eat, in order to feed yourself, and in order to feed your family, that is an allowable situation because it's something that you need. You have determined that this is the way that you have to survive, that this is the only way that you're going to survive, right? It's the best course of action. But on the flip side, if you're in a situation where you don't need that, and you're simply doing it in excess just because you want to, then it's incorrect to do. Why? Because there is no practical reason for why you're doing it other than just wanting to do it, right? And that's the difference, at least for me. And maybe somebody else might have a different perception of this. And please do, if you share this around, encourage people to put their ideas in the comments because I do read them later. We always read the comments later as well, and sometimes that helps us come up with new topics and things of that nature. Because, like I said, this will become a podcast episode. But get what I'm saying. You can see how you said that? No, we don't need meat to live. So, from your perspective, killing a certain type of animal to eat would be wrong. Because from your experiences, based on your beliefs, your experiences, and what you have done in your life to verify that you don't need that. So you doing that would be wrong for you because it's something you don't need. You would be doing it only out of either desire or convenience as opposed to a need. And yes, that is a part of discipline. So I actually do like that. I like that. I appreciate that you brought that up. Because these are things that we have to ask, right? These are things that we have to ask. Because we have to determine when something is necessary and when it's unnecessary, you know? And in a lot of ways, well, I know, but I'm just saying based off what you said. You said, no, we don't need meat to live. So based on that, you are saying and you are affirming that hunting and killing is something that is not needed for you to do in order to live. So for you, that will be something that is wrong because it's something you don't need. All right, Kiki Nikoda said, you're doing what ifs. So then if you were in a place surrounded by plants that are not meant to be consumed and kill, would you then kill the animal? Okay, that's actually a valid question. And yeah, look, and honestly, I don't mind the what ifs just because this is I'm always into expanding a concept. I'm always into like digging deep into a concept and figuring out exactly what we can get from it. So this is something, this is something we can do, That's why I like having you on here sometimes, man. Because you do bring up what if scenarios and counter arguments. I find that interesting. Because these are things, honestly, when me and DarksKing talk, we bounce concepts like that off of each other. One thing that this podcast has actually helped us do a lot of is really take a look at the things that we initially came into this believing and trusting and knowing and picking them apart and looking at it for what it really is, right? Versus what we think it is. And for me, that's done a whole lot. And I think I could say the same thing for DarksKing as well, Because, like I said, there's usually only one or two wrong ways to do something. A lot of people do believe that there are a lot of ways to do something wrong, and that may be true. But there's also a lot of ways to do something right, too. And it depends on the perceived need, the necessity of the thing, and how it applies and how it can affect you. Yeah. I know you're not saying it in that way. I like I said, I totally appreciate that. Divergent opinions are good in order to gain knowledge. I've watched some of your things on YouTube. I'll have to look again because it has been a while. I've kind of been under a rock just due to work, so you'll have to bear with me. But I do ride around a lot, so I might have to check out some of the new stuff that you have. Feel free to post up your link, man. Let people know what you do. We're all for it. Speaking of such, we are officially in the new space for Twyman Art Gallery. The gallery is not yet open, but it should be, I believe, in March. So when that happens, you guys will be, if you're in the area, you guys will be able to come in and really see just what has been done with the place. And it looks amazing. Like what you're seeing now is nothing. Like this is that little sliver with the art in the back. That's not even the gallery for real. Right. Hopefully we can get a banner put up back here with us on it, with the Black in a Minute on there. We'll dress this place up because it's our new home now. So with that being said, let me go ahead and I'm gonna pop up this lovely little link because there is a whole gang of artwork in here that I know some of you guys have found interest in just because you've seen it in some of the art gallery like in some of our live streams. So let me see. And hopefully a couple times we'll be able to actually show you guys some of it. Yeah, post your YouTube link, bro. Hold on. Let me go ahead and post this up. That right there is actually the link that you can go on to where you can actually see a lot of the art that is actually inside of this lovely building. And I'm sure that the grand opening come March is going to be amazing because I get to see some of it now because we're in here and it looks dope. But back onto the subject, and it's getting close to an hour, so I'll probably close out soon. But when it comes to discipline, when it comes to teaching, because that's basically what it is, when it comes to passing out and imparting knowledge, you have to be aware of the fact that, you have to be aware of the fact that you have a responsibility to impart knowledge that is not only correct, but also to impart it in a correct way, in a correct and a healthy manner. We as people who do try to lean on the side of gaining and passing down knowledge have an absolute responsibility to pass it down in a way that is properly digestible and in a way that carries on things that are right-minded and that are rightly lined up with what needs to be done, and that's from helping somebody fix a car, mounting a TV, or rules for living. Because here's the thing. The moment that you become a teacher is the moment that you gain a new level of accountability. The moment that you educate somebody is the moment that you become a teacher. So that means what? Anytime that you feel the need to pull up to somebody and drop knowledge on them, you have already made yourself accountable for also holding yourself up to that same standard that you're holding them to. And if you do not, the consequence that comes of that is that other people will see that and they will recognize that. And they will recognize that you are not adhering to the standard that you set. And that is the pitfall of being a person who passes down knowledge. That is the pitfall of being a teacher. So one thing I will say, and we'll probably close after this, is if you have knowledge to pass down and to bring forth, be open with it, but also be disciplined enough to understand how to be open with it. Because here's the thing. You have to discipline self before you can go out and discipline anybody else. You have to teach self how to act right before you can teach anybody else how to act right. You have to educate self before you can educate anybody else on anything. And as they say in church, and I've heard it so many times from being a child on up, the message comes to the messenger first, right? So that means what? That if I'm giving this out, if I'm passing this on to you guys, it's coming to me first. And I now have to hold myself accountable with this new knowledge in the same way that I would expect you guys to. So that's just something I want to leave you guys with, because I know it's very easy to just pop up and say stuff, I mean, look at the Derek Jacksons of the world. I hate to say that, but that's a perfect example. Is it necessarily that he was saying the wrong things about some of the standards that he expressed should be upheld by men? No. Some of the things he was saying were actually rightly lined up. But was it presented in the right way? At times, no. And did he end up having to be held accountable for his own actions whenever he went against his own standards? Absolutely. And that's the part you have to remember, you know. And that's not something that you're going to be perfect at. I'm not perfect at it. This is something I'm still learning. That's part of why we're talking about it. But every day is a new opportunity to gain, pass down, and test knowledge. Every day is a new opportunity to develop ourselves into the individuals that we want to become. And every day is a new opportunity for us to be better than we were the day before. So, I would just like to say that this has been the Black in a Minute podcast live stream, sponsored by Twyman Art, and also within the walls of the new Twyman Art space. I've been NeRo AnGeLo. I just want to tell you guys to have a wonderful night. Think on what has been said. Drop some ideas in the comments if you have them. And peace out. Power.